Good morning, everyone. Here we are in Colonial, Williamsburg to finish up our little talk on colonialism. And we're right in front of the Governor's Palace here, right? Governor's Palace?
Yep, Governor's Palace in Williamsburg.
So just on the topic of colonialism, because that's sort of our focus, we're not really going to try to cover much further than colonialism. Normal, healthy colonialism ends when the parent country recognizes that their child is grown up and ready to be independent. So we're going to talk today about some of the ways, some of the providential things that happened in American history that enabled America to grow up.
Yeah, and so one of the primary facets of that was the religious identity of the colonies. And so you had, with the early colonialism in England's colonies, most of them, especially in Virginia and this region, were Anglican. There were some Congregationalists and others, but predominantly it was those among the Anglican Church. And so what happened in this time period was the Great Awakening happened, and that became a significant motivating factor for the development of identity among the colonies. So you had preachers like Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield who went throughout the colonies proclaiming this gospel, the Reformation principles of individual salvation, personal responsibility, and then that impacted the church greatly. We had sweeping revivals throughout the colonies, people turning to faith, turning to the scriptures as their authority, and then you had this direction of liberty and responsibility moving in the hearts of men. And so then that's the reasons that we had people like John Adams and Patrick Henry who were motivated with the principles of liberty to oppose tyranny and stand against its abuses with the King of England. And so King George actually called the war for American independence a preacher's rebellion, or that Presbyterian rebellion, because it was motivated and moved by the colonial churches at the time. And as we consider the various aspects of colonialism from two different perspectives, right? We have a Spanish version or Portuguese method that goes and brings the wealth back to the mother country primarily. The Protestant method, totally different, wherein the riches, the wealth, the resources grew in abundance locally and more often stayed local. So just think, if we start with the recognition that Jamestown, the average, if you had 6 people, 3 generations, grandparents, parents, and 2 kids, you had those 6 people, they needed, I believe it was 10 acres, or 10 square miles, that's what it was, 10 square miles to feed themselves. The Jamestown settlers needed less than 3 acres to feed that many people. So, and as you continue moving in the direction of the progress of development and technologies and resources, better stewardship of the resources because they feared God, you see a greater increase with smaller footprint. And so you are able to have a settlement like this that's able to take up a larger area and still sustain a larger population. Mm-hmm. And a final aspect is recognizing the American colonies they themselves viewed themselves as carrying on the legacy of true Englishmen, being true to the English doctrines of the Magna Carta, all the way back to common law established by King Alfred. They saw America as the next extension of being faithful to that, and Britain returning to the divine right of kings as a regression, a step back from continual historical development. So one of the other aspects, so everything that we're talking about here is in the context of understanding what we started talking about yesterday in Jamestown, which is that culture and religious principles have consequences, and that is what Williamsburg is. The consequences of the initial work that the settlers did when they came here to Jamestown, to Plymouth, to all of the initial settlements, bore fruit, and lots of fruit. And that's what we're seeing today. Just 2 generations later, people are establishing larger communities like Kevin's talking about. And I think one of the things that we
tend to avoid talking about too much in our culture is the idea that ideas have consequences, and the consequences of Christian culture are prosperity, peace, wealth, peace between people, and peace with neighbors. Those are all things that are benefits of Christian society. De Tocqueville, Aubrey's going to talk more about him in just a moment, but I'm just going to bring him up. He's a French philosopher. If you haven't read him yet, he's an authority from the time who observed English culture transplanted into America and watched the fruit of it, and he noted things about Christian culture that he believed foundationally contributed to what was happening here. The burgeoning of wealth and the burgeoning of peaceful self-government. So what's amazing about this period in American history is that while not all colonists were Christians, people all attended church, and they all understood that Christianity was the foundation of the civilization they were building, and that it was actually a popular thing to be a Christian, which is kind of a foreign concept to us in our day and age. So the one of the things that's happening right now at this period of history is that the New England Primer is after, we talked about in Plymouth that the Bible and what's it called? Pilgrim's Progress. Thank you. Pilgrim's Progress were two of the most popular books that were transplanted from England here, and then after that, the New England Primer became one of the biggest books because the parents of this generation wanted to continue that tradition of Christian religion and Christian culture by extension, and they knew the way to do that was to teach their children to be literate, so they could read the Bible and be self-educated and expand the reach of the gospel. And from the Primer came the newer edition of the Blue-Backed Speller. All of these things are just extensions of family culture established by Christian religion in Williamsburg.
Right, yeah, so one other thing I just wanted to mention about de Tocqueville, he talked about the climate here and compared it to South American climate and how its ruggedness, cooler weather, and fertile soil lent itself to productivity, sons and daughters who knew how to work hard and engage their minds. And so we had men who were awake and thinkers, and if you want to read about an inspiring woman at the time, read about, I think it was 1740s, it's Eliza Lucas Pinckney. It's a little chilly, isn't it, Allie?
Chilly.
A little chilly.
Mark it.
Eliza Lucas Pinckney. She was a visionary, developed indigo dyes, but one of my favorite stories about Eliza Lucas is that she had a vision for the future of America, and she said, we're going to plant an oak plantation because eventually America is going to need a navy. And if anybody knows about oaks and how slow they grow, this was a long-term, multi-generational legacy vision that she had and accomplished. So as a young person, so people were thinking big long-term thoughts. That's one of the ways that America grew up.
Yeah, and another aspect of that long-term thought was the development of law and civil polity here in the colonies. They developed it, and based on writings of Blackstone and the English common law, and they developed a colonial styles of government that would lead to self-government eventually. We had men like Witherspoon, who educated 1/6 of the signers of, or the formers of the Constitution and the Continental Congress. He had significant impact teaching about the principles of biblical government and basing the laws of a society off just and right and equitable laws of governing. So that's some of the frameworks and the development as America was growing up here as a colony and yearning for its own independence and self-governance. So we're going to have a little bit more to tell you, but
yeah, we have just one more episode here at Williamsburg, and then we'll have a closing bibliography episode when we get back. Right now we're just going to have some fun exploring Williamsburg. It looks lots of fun things to see.
Lots of fun things. Check out that horse and carriage.
Like the color. Like that color.
All right.
All right.
We'll be back.